Hi, everybody. Welcome to HR Are You Listening? It's your host, Marta Fernandez. I'm an HR journalist, and today we have an amazing guest, beautiful human being I just recently met. Her name is 𝗕𝗂𝗊𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗃. I hope you guys enjoy her. She's a beautiful person that I want to share with you. So hi, 𝗕𝗂𝗊𝗲𝗲𝗃. How are you?
Hi, Marta. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited for our conversation. You're an amazing professional, and therefore I would love for you to introduce yourself to our amazing audience.
Sure. So my name is 𝗕𝗂𝗊𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗃. I currently live in Portland, Oregon. My day-to-day for work, I do two different things. I have my own consulting practice. My background is in organizational psychology, and I really specialize kind of the intersection between employee engagement and well-being. I'm so passionate about workplace well-being and making workplaces better that I started a nonprofit called Wellbeing Think Tank. We've been around for over 5 years now, and we actually offer free educational sessions on well-being at work. We explore a lot of different topics. And the great thing is our monthly sessions are all online, so very accessible. Anyone can join. And we even have an annual conference, which is hybrid. So you can come in person or you can join us online, which is really fun.
Oh my God, you have such an amazing background, guys. Like, just listen to what you said. There's a lot of resources for you. I'll link down below everything that she mentioned so you get access to that. And so she's a valuable resource, not only because she is the person that she is and have her hard work, as you heard. She's very passionate about helping other people and contributing to the work environment. So let's start. So what do you have for us today? Tell me.
Absolutely. When we were talking before, we were talking about what's a personal story that might be helpful for the audience. And I was trying to think of something that really ties into what I do every day and kind of also what informs my work, but also a little personal journey. And there were two instances that immediately came to mind, and they're related to well-being. And one is about belonging at work. So belonging has actually been shown to be our key indicator of well-being. So feeling like we belong at work is extremely important. And then the other one is about positivity. And I'm really into non-toxic positivity right now. I'm actually doing a session on it later this summer. And I have a whole story of like when positivity can be toxic in the workplace. And yeah, so I don't know if either of those like sound interesting, if you want to dive into any one of those with me.
Yeah, actually, I'm very keen to the toxic positivity. I find it fascinating because not everybody shares that side of the stories. Like they just say, yeah, I had a toxic positivity, but what's that mean? How it looks, like how it affected you? What was the scenario? So now I'm actually more curious because it's something that intrigues me. I'm very curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all know that we can go too far with positivity. And I am a very positive person. I have a very positive mindset. Our mindsets are very important in our daily life and our work life. But we also need to be grounded in reality. And I think that really explains me as a person. I come from a very traumatic background. Looking at me, you wouldn't guess the background I've had, but I've been through a lot of strife and hardship. I still deal with a lot of things, but how I get through it is by having a positive mindset. But toxic positivity is when we neglect to honor reality and neglect to honor what people are facing. And I think we're definitely at a crisis point right now. I deal with it in my day-to-day work, I try to find this balance between what C-suite executives want and what our workforce wants. And sometimes their viewpoints are very different on how things are playing out. But I'll share a personal story, and that's why I decided to build this talk I'm doing later. I'm speaking at the Wellness Alliance conference, which is happening in August in Austin, Texas. I kind of opened my session talking about this story. So it does help to know that I am a very positive person. I usually have a smile on my face. I'm the person people come to for hugs. I'm a safe space for people. No matter your background, whoever you are, like I am a safe space for people. But I was going through a really challenging time in my life. And this was several years ago. And I had some really significant health issues. I was still dealing with those. And I had this week where I lost my 19-year-old cat. So a lot of us have had pets at some point in our life. 19 years is a long time. I was obviously upset. I took a couple of days off work, and I actually already had a vacation planned. So I took a couple of days off work. I was back for a couple of days. Then I went on vacation. And when I came back from vacation, I got norovirus. I don't know if you've ever had norovirus before, but everything exits your body at once. So I had to call off work again. And also, when I came home from vacation, on my door was a rent increase. So my rent was going up by 10%, which is the maximum you can increase it in our state. And I was just struggling. Like, I was sick. I was still dealing with some health stuff. I had lost my cat. And then I remember someone I worked with saying, oh, I can't believe you called off. Like, we had to cancel client meetings. And then you came back and you called off again. We had to cancel on some clients twice. And I was like, yeah, that's the problem. No one should ever be that important that there's no backup. But I'm dealing with all of these things, and things were going on in the world as well. And I'm not going to dive into politics or anything, but some things were happening in the world that were really impacting me as well. And to be a good worker, I was still doing my job. I was still performing. I was still doing everything. But I would just come into work and I would go into my office and I would shut the door. And we had glass offices so everyone could still see in. But I was definitely segmenting because I personally was going through a really hard time. What matters in the four walls of the workplace is, am I still meeting standards even through difficult times? And I was. But I'll never forget my president knocking on the office door and saying, hey, can I chat with you? And I'm like, sure. And they said, you just don't seem like yourself. You know, you're staying in your office, your door is shut. And I was like, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. And they said, now, Chase, you go around and you speak at all these different conferences. If you were up on stage right now, what would you tell your audience? How would you get them inspired and smiling and happy? And I was like, I would acknowledge that they're going through a really difficult time. I was like, we can't all be, that's toxic positivity. Me telling you I'm going through all these hardships and you turning around and saying, but why aren't you smiling? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you behaving in this way? When that has nothing to do with my performance. It's like, I'm actually still working, still doing things. I'm still taking care of clients, but I was really prioritizing my own well-being. I was creating additional boundaries for myself during a difficult time. And I was just, I was really struck in that moment that their thought was I should just keep smiling and pushing through it. And my perspective was very different.
Can I pause very quickly? Because there is a couple of things that comes to my head. Kind of interesting because you said how this person comes into your office, into your space, right? And foster, I don't know whether it's intentionally or not, toxic positivity. I mean, sometimes people have a hard time to accept that bubbly, outgoing persons like you have times where, hey, like, I cannot be always smiling, and don't accept that. It's like a double sword with us, because it happens to me sometimes where, like, you're super outgoing and you're very talkative and you're very like, hey, I'm here for you. And then sometimes you have a very low time and people expectations is like all the way up here. Like, you're not excelling at your job. You're not that good anymore because you're not that high person bubbly. But I'm like, I'm still doing my job. I'm still complying what I need to do. And if you're setting this expectation that for me to excel at my job, it's I have to be all bubbly and create this toxic environment with my positiveness. And then I wonder how you felt, because at least for me, it's a bit frustrating when someone pushes those expectations that I always have to be positive. And I feel kind of bad to your boss slowly diminish your hardship by saying what he said. You don't have to tell him anything. Like, your bosses don't have to know every detail of your personal life. Chase decided to do that, which is that part of the trust and the relationship that they have. But if the boss is also diminishing, like, it's okay, just keep going. I'm like, no, I would have felt, empathetically speaking, I would have felt like invisible. I don't know how you felt. If you could explain a little bit about that. How was that interaction with you?
Yeah, I think it's the hard thing. I always get frustrated when people say we need to let people bring their full selves to work, but we don't let people bring their full selves to work. We let people bring their work selves to work because there is a level of professionalism we have to have in the workplace. There's boundaries we have to have in the workplace so we can still do our jobs. And I was really frustrated because we did have a good relationship where I felt comfortable telling them things that were going on, but they were immediately dismissive of all those hardships, like you said. And what would you tell everyone else? And I'm like, I would tell them it's normal to be sad sometimes. It's normal to have sadness, depression, anxiety, worry. Those are normal human emotions. We all can't be up all of the time. Emotions ebb and flow. And what's the problem with me not? What's the problem? There was no problem going on. Like you asked, what was my problem? Yes, I was behaving differently because I was going through something really challenging. I was going through a really challenging time, but I was still showing up. I was still doing my job. And then if I let you know, hey, this is what's going on, and then to just immediately say, if you were up on stage, what would you tell the room? And what I would tell the room and what I tell audiences is we need to let people have human emotions. We need to allow for humanity in the workplace. And we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And a lot of people are dealing with life. People are dealing with financial hardships. They're having relationships end. They're going through grief and loss. We're all experiencing usually some amount of trauma at some point in our life all of the time. And sometimes we're doing great. We're not experiencing anything. And then sometimes it feels like everything happens to us all at once. But as humans, we all have these shared human experiences. We all experience trauma, loss, injury, hard times. And we need to support human needs in the workplace. And supporting our human needs isn't telling people you have to be happy all the time. Even if someone was in a customer-facing role, in psychology, we call that high emotional labor. So if you're in a call center or you're customer-facing, if you're having a hard time, you still have to put on that face and greet the customer and take care of people. And that takes a tremendous amount of emotional labor. And that is your job. We need to then create space where you can decompress, and that's break time, that's having good relationships with supervisors, that's being understanding. So I think I was exceptionally frustrated because there wasn't a performance issue. I was still putting on the happy face if I was with a client or doing things. But hey, if I'm just in my office, I need that time to me now to decompress and to just be. And I see this often in executive leaders, not all over the place, but when we look at the types of people who tend to make it to the C-suite, they tend to come from certain backgrounds. Overwhelmingly, they tend to come from more higher socioeconomic class. They might have had more of a stable family home environment. And so they don't necessarily understand what everyone else is going through if they've come from that environment. So their experience in life has been one of support, where maybe they had family that supported them and they had a lot of support. But a lot of people in workplaces don't always have those supports. And we know with well-being now, we're in this time of social disconnection. We're in a loneliness epidemic. People are really struggling. And I think we need to be more mindful of the humanity. We really need to bring humanity back into the workplace and understand the human needs and what work is. And if you're getting your work done and you're doing things, is it a want to have or a need to have? You might want me to be behaving and smiling in a certain way all the time, but do I need to be that way in that moment? Or am I just making you uncomfortable because I'm not smiling right now? And that's a problem. Like, they were obviously being impacted by me not being all smile. I'm like, that's a you problem. I'm still doing my job. I'm still taking care of things. And I felt like a significant lack of empathy and understanding, and just keep pushing through, you'll make it through. And that's not what I needed in that moment. What I needed in that moment was a little bit of softer empathy of just, I'm so sorry to hear you're going through that right now. Please let me know how I could support you during this time. Like, not put on a smiling face and go tell other people to smile.
I find it fascinating. I have to ask, because were you in that moment in time self-aware of the terminology of toxic positivity, or did you find that terminology to be like, oh, this is what it is? Because, for example, I've learned about like the terminology itself, like this is called, or what he's doing or what she's doing or what the company's doing, fostering is a toxic positivity. I'm wondering, do you say immediately, oh, my boss is promoting, toxic positivity, or you didn't know, and how do you figure out that was actually happening?
If I remember correctly, I think I said that directly to them of what you're asking me to do is toxic positivity, and I don't subscribe to that. That is, though, my work. Like, my background's organizational psychology. I work in workplace well-being. So this is very normal terminology for me. So this is what I do for a living. And that's not the type of organization I was in, but that was the type of work I did with clients. So for me, I immediately knew what was going on. And I was like, no, I'm not going to behave that. Like, what you're asking me to do is be inauthentic and act like I'm not having a difficult time when I am. And when we break it down, work at its core is an exchange of labor for pay. So I am going to do this labor for you. You are going to compensate me. And I was still doing that. I was still doing my duties. I was taking care of clients. I wasn't going into client meetings being inappropriate or anything. I was just making them uncomfortable because my behavior was a little different. And what the appropriate action when you see someone in the workplace, whether you're in HR, not in HR, just a good human being, if you notice someone acting differently, chances are something's going on and we don't know what that is. And I think there's a way you can say, hey, Marta, you just haven't seemed yourself lately. Is there anything I can do to support you right now? You don't even need to say what's wrong. You can just say, could I offer you any extra support right now? Is there anything I could be doing to help you? And that kind of can open up the conversation, because I think then you're showing someone, hey, I'm seeing you. I'm seeing that you're not yourself. Maybe we don't have a close enough relationship for me to dig or ask, and depending on your relationship, you might be able to foster a deeper conversation. But when someone does, you have a level of psychological safety, another term we like to throw around, where someone opens up, the worst thing you can do is just diminish what they just shared. If they're sharing, oh, this just happened, the worst thing, that doesn't sound like a big deal. It's obviously impacting that person. Okay, if you don't feel that, but understanding how to say, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Please let me know how I can support you during this time, or what could we as an organization do for you? We miss that a lot in the workplace.
Yeah, I'm thinking, like, if you say like what's not really the company's culture, maybe how you said it's the particular leader, immediately the idea of this is work. I know the terminologies, I know how to identify, and you had courage and honesty to tell your boss, hey, this is what you're trying to do is, or what you did is toxic positivity. Now I'm just like in the curiosity mindset. How would someone, for example, me or any other person, or identify toxic positivity? For me, this topic can be very gray. In your story, because of your education and your background and your work, you were able to immediately identify and address it. I don't know if that ever happened to you, like you're in a work environment and things are moving very quickly, and then you suddenly turn around like, that doesn't, well, what was that, right? What was that about? I would not know any better if my boss had told me that he wants me to be more cheerful. I don't know why, but I will do that. But how do you handle that? How do you identify this potential toxic positivity?
So I think something we're seeing a lot of right now is layoffs, right? A lot of organizations are laying off their employees. And when an organization is going through layoffs, that's really hard. It causes fear for people who are being laid off. It causes stress for people who are being laid off. It would be probably inappropriate for an organization to be like, hey, we're also going to celebrate this at the same time. So I think it's just acknowledging that things are difficult. And if an individual is going through a difficult time, we need to be able to honor that. People, as human beings, we have needs, and we have a level of appropriateness in the workplace. Someone breaking down, going into crisis, HR, other people, we're not meant to be therapists. I'm not a therapist. We're here to refer people. Hey, maybe the AP could really support you right now. Or I just want to make sure you're aware of the benefits our organization offers. I just want to share this link with you. It sounds to be helpful. But I think just being mindful of the tone of whether it's an individual or a group. So sometimes organizations, they're really dismissive of what's going on. Some of this of what's going on in the world right now. How are people being impacted by it? Sometimes we have a natural disaster or there's something that happens locally and it impacts people or nationally. So it's just being mindful of the experiences that are impacting your workforce. And you don't always know that. And you can't be mind readers. If no one's sharing anything with you, you can't be expected to, help. But I think it's paying attention. I think as leaders or as individuals, when you're paying attention to how people are responding, are people naturally being positive? Yeah, like excited, or are you seeing, are you observing someone acting differently or that they don't want to be a part of it? And then that's where you can have those hopefully side conversations that, of course, there's so much groundwork that has to be built to be at that level of a relationship where you have trust and you can just be vulnerable and you have that psychological safety. So we're always building those layers so people can be themselves and be vulnerable in the workplace. And then it's about supporting them through the difficult times. And the great thing is when you support human needs, when an individual in the workplace is going through a hard time and you support them through that, it develops even more loyalty. If someone's going through a really challenging divorce, or maybe they lost a parent and if they're really struggling with grief, if the workplace is able to provide a condition where maybe they need time off, or they're just taking access to benefits, or they can work their tasks during this difficult time until they kind of get back to where they were. Of course, trauma always changes us. We're never back to where we were. We just kind of transform and move forward. They're going to remember that. And they're going to feel supported by the workplace and they're going to want to do that good work. I think it's just being mindful in the moment. And I did feel we did have a very good relationship. This leader did not mean anything intentional. They weren't trying to hurt me intentionally. And I did tell them immediately, I was like, them not to practice toxic positivity, that human emotions are normal and that it's totally fine to feel that way. What do you mean? I said, I would never get on stage and tell people to just be happy all the time. That's not what I do.
What did they say?
I think they didn't really know how to react at the time. This was several years ago. I mean, I remember a lot. I remember them coming into the office and us having this conversation. And I think I was like, I would never do that. What are you talking about? That's toxic positivity. I don't subscribe. No. It also ties into the belonging. I definitely struggled in this workplace with a sense of belonging. My background was very, very different than a lot of individuals at this workplace. I remember the same individual, and again, great individual. They certainly didn't mean anything by it. I don't hold anything against them. We're all learning. We all make mistakes. That's how we learn. I say we fail up. But I'll never forget, we had done leadership journeys, and I was one of the few, if not the only people who grew up in and out of children's services. I got emancipated at 17. So I was working multiple full-time jobs. And I worked full-time when I was in the military. I worked full-time through school. I worked full-time through grad school. And that was not the experience of most of my coworkers. Most of my coworkers came from white-collar, traditional, stable background where maybe their parents even paid for college. They're like, how on earth did you work and go to school? I'm like, most people do that. Like, most people work and go to school at the same time. That's a pretty normal experience. And I remember...
Sorry, can I ask, just for clarification for the audience, because now, this makes a lot of sense why it ties with belonging. You're talking positivity, but I'm wondering, were you growing your career? Were you survival mode? Clearly you were good at your job, right? And
yes.
So I'm just wondering, because now you said that you had multiple jobs and all your background play a factor. So
at this stage, I was in the same stage I'm at now. So I'm almost 48. So I was in my 40s. So I was definitely at kind of that mid-career, accomplished stage, doing well. What I had been saying was we had presented these leadership journeys. And so in my leadership journey, I was sharing about myself that, this is how I grew up, and I always worked multiple jobs. And then I remember this same leader coming to my office and saying, I was really inspired by your leadership journey that you shared with us. And it seemed really important for us to understand that you're a hard worker, that you worked multiple jobs until you were 30. You're a hard worker. And I was like, that wasn't what I was trying to get across. What I was trying to help you understand was that I've had to work 2 or 3 jobs until I was 30. It wasn't until I was 30 that I was making a level of income that I only had to work 1 job. And that is also a very typical experience for a lot of workers. A lot of workers have multiple jobs, especially these days. People have side hustles. People are working part-time in addition to their full-time job. And I'm very sensitive to that. And so because of my own personal background, I always assume everyone's had a hard life and it's probably full of trauma because that's what my life has been. So I'm always very sensitive to what people need. And I'm not perfect by any means. Like people say, oh, she sucked when she worked here, or she didn't do this right. It doesn't mean I don't make mistakes at all, because say I fail up and I fail at something every week. But my experience was so different than a lot of my other coworkers. And, you know, when we think about diversity in the workplace, there's so many different layers of diversity. And a lot of times when organizations, I'm bopping around to so many places, but when we talk about hire for culture, sometimes when you see bad hiring for culture, we're hiring people that are all very alike. And so you're creating a culture of similarity where everyone has the same background, the same this, the same that. And that's actually not good for business. You want diversity of thought. That's really what we're trying to get to with diversity in the workplace, is diversity of thought, so we can innovate and iterate and look at things through different ways. And it was very apparent that I did not fit in this workplace. I was not a part of the majority there.
Before you move on, what made you feel that you didn't belong? Because in technicality, you share with the leaders, you know, your story and how this and that. Clearly, they understood something different when we were trying to attend. But if you wouldn't have had that conversations or sharing that information, I would not know any better. You know, Chase, she is where she is because of her hard work, because of her merits, of her personality, your work ethics, your morals, everything that encompasses you, the person who you are, the leader that you are today. Yes, it's from your past, but a lot of people don't tend to look at people's past. Does that make sense? There's obvious parts where you see lack of belonging. You know, like when we talk about cultural environment, the general idea like, well, I'm from Central America, you come from Europe, and you're American. There's a sense of belonging that lacks because we have cultural issues. But your story, for me, if I was in that position, like working with you, I mean, with no ill intention, I would not have thought about that. What you're trying to share of not the lack of belongingness, but the feeling that you felt a little bit, hey, I'm not from the same tree. I'm from this tree. I don't know what made it be the way it was for you.
I think for me, I am very open. There's a book like The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, Stephen Covey. And one is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so I really like to get to know people and their backgrounds so I can understand them. And I'm also very open with my background because I want people to understand me. But it started at this employer pretty early on. I will never forget being during the pandemic and in quarantine and getting on a video call and someone saying, "Is that your apartment?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is like my whole apartment. Like, this is where I live." Oh my God, how do you live like that? And I was like, I had in-unit laundry, a dishwasher, and a balcony. This is like the nicest place I've ever lived in. And everyone else had houses. Most of them had 2 houses. They had vacation homes and regular homes. And their experiences and backgrounds were so different. And as much as I would try to share, it didn't seem like they could learn. So I would try to like, oh, well, this is my background. And because of the work I do, I am more of the norm, actually. Like there's more people in the workforce who have to work multiple jobs or who have spent part of their life paycheck to paycheck, or I'm very sensitive to people who've struggled because I've struggled. But you don't need to live in the struggle forever. We can get better. We can do things. But it's how do we create pathways to success? And so in spite of my background, I am quote unquote successful, you know, and I do have a very positive mindset. I'm always working to be better. I don't have all the answers. No one does. I'm not perfect. I mess up all the time, but I learn from my mistakes and I keep going. And I'm just very open that, yeah, this is me. I'm not perfect. I'm a messy human. But not everyone is like that. I work best in environments where people are just like honest and vulnerable and pay attention and not, this is how we are. This is how we do things. This is how we're going to keep doing things. And that's not a very kind of inclusive environment. And so I kind of intentionally try to bring people in, and how do we make people feel like we belong? There's always going to be some people feeling of being outsiders and stuff. And, I kept trying to put myself there, but I'm like, I was fine. I worked there for a while. Like, I had a good experience. I had great experiences with clients and with coworkers there and everything, but it was obvious that I did not fit in there. I was not a part of that culture.
I want to say, I feel empathetic towards the situation where you open your camera and someone, the first things that points out is your apartment. I mean, people, I'm just here wow, you are here showing off your best self, and someone, the only thing that focuses on what you don't have or what you have in terms of materialistically surroundings. You could be in the middle of nowhere working, and that doesn't take away the person that you are. Mm-hmm. For me, I think if that was the situation in your shoes, I felt like, oh yeah, we're not in the same we're not in the same bubble. We're not in the same tree here. I want to tie that very quickly with the whole work culture environment that you were, because now I'm wondering, do you had any HR support in terms of this, programs? Because it feels like you did a lot of work on your own. Granted, you're very mindful of that, but because you said well, this needs to be done. I need to be open, or I need to be more mindful, or hey, come over, see my side. Look at my grass is also green as yours. It's just different type of grass. Just trying to find an analogy to that. But I'm wondering, do you ever feel lonely in that aspect of I'm fighting a battle at work where it seems that I'm the only one seeing the obvious, that there is a lack of belongingness or intention to try to create more inclusive environment? I'm just wondering.
They weren't really anywhere. It's a successful organization. They have a very strong culture, and there are people who fit great with that culture. But that culture was not right for me for a variety of reasons. And it wasn't right for other people. I watched a lot of people leave while I was there. And it doesn't mean it's a bad place to work, but it definitely wasn't right for me. There are a lot of people who have worked there, but the things that I value in a workplace and that I look for are not what was happening there. It didn't work for me. And then I eventually self-selected out. They were not surprised when I left. They were like, yeah, we didn't think it'd be this soon, but we were just waiting for you to quit. We knew you were going to quit. We were hoping you would stay longer, but yeah, we knew you were going to quit. When I was doing a lot for myself, I was paying out of pocket to see a therapist. I was really working on my boundaries and my work. There's never one person's faults. It's always, we both have a part. I have a part in it. There were definitely things I could have done better. If I could turn back the clock and work there again, there are a lot of things I would do differently. There's no finger pointing. It's no, they did wrong this way. If you interviewed them, they could probably be like, here, let me tell you things Chase did while she was here. So it shouldn't be finger pointing. It shouldn't be they're awful, because they're not awful. But hey, these were things that did not work for me. I do tend to be opinionated about certain things because it is my work. And I'm really passionate about creating environments of psychological safety and really being intentionally inclusive and really understanding who is your workforce and who are the people and what are their needs, instead of just guessing or assuming everyone's like you. Yeah. We can't go through life or the workplace just assuming everyone has had the same experience of us. I'm very sensitive to all of that stuff because it's what I do.
Yeah, you know what I'm thinking? It's this is a part where, and it's not blaming people, but when I talk, I try to hold my profession accountable, because there's different type of HR, right? Levels, if you could say. There's the basic admin HR that does basic stuff, and there's people who are creating programs like Chase, where they bring more awareness, build a better work environment. And when I look into it, it's more man, it would have been very tiring for you to work there, because you're not only working for what you're paid for, which is do your work, but also you were trying to shed some light or some different perspective of how could this be better. And your HR, I don't know how big was your HR, but this is where I'm people, this is where we need to step up our game. This is why HR should be more out there with the people, with the employees, and see that there is need. And if I see Chase battling this battle by herself of creating a safe place or awareness of her perspective of diversity, I feel well, they fail at a certain degree, because at least how I perceive my work, it's a customer service work. It's a service work. My job is for the people and only for the people. And even though you're in 40s, right? You're a grown-up woman. You know what you want. You choose to leave or you choose to stay there. It's up to you. But at the end of the day, it's hard to try to change or give some glimpse of different perspective by yourself. When people, maybe they're like, oh yeah, that's Chase. I don't know. I see you because I understand, but I want to have empathy towards that. That's why I'm asking, what was your HR? Because I'm saying, hey, do you want to create an environment where Chase can thrive? Like everybody liked you. You were doing great at your job. Your leaders were content with your quality of work. So why you didn't trying to create that ambience or at least be mindful? My thought was in that aspect.
Yeah, this is a great question, Marta, because it's one of the reasons why HR is so important at organizations. And HR is a profession and it's a practice. There's certain professions, HR is one of them, where we don't always value the professional HR. We see a lot of organizations where people just get appointed HR. Congratulations, you're HR now. But they haven't had the training, they haven't had the experience, they haven't had the mentorship. So organizations should really invest in having HR teams that are properly trained in HR, whether it's through their academics, whether it's through credentialing programs. And academics is a piece of it, but then there's a lot of applied experience. HR is really a practice. And so you really learn through being a practitioner. And so mentoring is very important. So making sure if you have junior HR professionals that they have mentoring with seniors. Maybe you're paying for mentoring. Maybe you're paying for coaching. Some organizations really invest in HR and they take it very seriously and they really vet their HR professionals and practitioners. And a lot of other organizations, they don't view HR as mission critical. And HR is mission critical for the success of an organization. And in the broad scope of HR, there are so many duties that can fall under HR. I am not an HR generalist. There are so many things I cannot do in regards to HR. I have some specialties within the HR lens, but a lot of things I cannot do. And I think I would really like to see more organizations invest in HR. I really don't want to slight places I worked at. I feel bad even saying something, but it was more of a homegrown HR team where people had experience, profession, and other things. And it was kind of like, oh, we're going to put you in this HR role. And even if you get put into an HR role, you can go out and take a test and pass it, but you still haven't practiced it. And there's also a personality type for HR. Like if you are not an inclusive person, you probably shouldn't be in HR. If you are not tolerant, if you're a racist, if you like, those people should not be in HR. You know, HR gets a bad rap sometimes in any profession. There's great people. There's people who struggle. And HR gets thrown under the bus a lot. And there are so many passionate HR professionals who deeply, deeply care about people. And they really want to make the work environment better. And that's who we want in those seats. I would like to see organizations, as they're building and scaling, take HR seriously. I'll say the same thing I say about managers, because oftentimes we promote people who are good at skills, but they don't have the other components yet. So we need to teach them. So we need to teach our HR professionals how to practice and how to be in HR. Then we need to let them be HR professionals. So where are the guardrails? Obviously, risk management is a part of HR. There's a level of that. So where are the guidelines? And then we need to hold them accountable. And if you have someone who's not meeting the standards, then maybe that's not the right role for them. That's a very general talk. But there was not a robust HR team. It doesn't mean they're bad people or anything like that, but it was not a built out.
I understand what you say. It's like the HR department was underdeveloped, or you had people not in their level of where they need to be, like in terms of expertise or experience. I keep saying that a lot of people in HR, older, who are in leadership roles now, were empirically taught, self-taught, where they just fall into HR, they did things, and then empirically, they thrive at it. Like, you know, company's doing well, but how society's changing and our needs have become more complex, that's where I keep saying, like, where is your HR? Because is it an HR that it just randomly was put together? Oh, like, let's bring, this person from this department, and then counting became the payroll person because it's counting payroll. That makes sense. And so I understand what you're saying. It's kind of hard to gauge when people tell the stories, because a lot of times I have realized that their HR department is not there because it was never truly created with purpose. It was just they needed something, or they needed someone to fill up the role of HR. Like, legally say we have an HR department, but in technicality, they don't have any HR professional properly prepared.
Yeah. And HR is a profession, and I don't think it gets the respect it deserves a lot of the time. And it's hard work. It's human-centered work. And then there's so many tasks and skills layered on, whether you do recruiting or you specialize in employee engagement, or you do payroll, or you do benefits, or you do full employee life cycle, or you do communicate. Like, there's so many aspects to HR, and no one can do them all. Although our HRs of one and our generalists, they sure do a lot, and they're doing the best they can. Sometimes I think we put way too many demands on HR as well. And it's like, hey, it's too much for any one person or two people. You need to invest in more of a team. And since HR doesn't generate revenue, it can be a hard sell sometimes at organizations, but HR does protect a lot of your revenue because we know how much attrition costs. And so investing in your HR helps keep you as an employer of choice and good recruiting and retention and all of those things. So yeah, I wish organizations would invest more in HR.
I think it would slowly start happening as also new HR leaders come into the workforce and start the advocacy of, hey, like, we really genuinely want to be here to take care of what it needs to be taken care of. But I want to wrap this up. I don't want to take much of your time, but I do want to ask you, do you have any thoughts or advices you want to give in terms of toxic positivity or belonging? I realized I never thought about it, but those two topics overlap with one another because of your stories. They do kind of make sense of, like, if you're creating a belonging environment, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to sell the toxic positivity, kind of like that perfect family, but internally everybody is, oh my God. I just thought about it. I don't know why, but I just imagined like that would be, yeah, we're a happy family, and you're like, no, you're promoting toxic positivity and there's no belonging, but people are just thriving at it. So any thoughts or ideas or anything that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'm going to throw out a couple tips for workplaces, and then I think a couple tips for us as individuals. So for workplaces, maybe invest in HR. If you're going to do things like surveys, anything like that, use evidence-based indexes. Don't just make up your own stuff. There is actually a science behind surveys, and there's a science behind employee listening and how do we get feedback, and never ask questions you're going to not take action on. I always say there's no such thing as survey fatigue, but there is inaction fatigue. People actually love to give feedback, but they don't like giving feedback when nothing happens to it. So really look for experts, whether you're hiring or you're using an outside consultancy. Or what's great with HR is there are so many amazing like external HR, like third-party HR that you can bring in, whether you're a small business or you need someone who just does this special thing. There's HR firms who like you can outsource HR and get these really amazing experienced professionals to come in and help you. Invest in your HR, whether it's internal or you need to bring in someone. And then I think as individuals, and I've learned this myself, we have to prioritize ourselves and our well-being. So really working with those healthy boundaries at work. Yes, we're hired to do a job. We want to make sure we're getting our tasks done and we're meeting the standards. But our health and well-being is also critically important, and we can't do our work and enjoy life if we don't prioritize our well-being. Setting boundaries early and often and reinforcing them. I always get frustrated when I hear people say, just quit your job or start your own business or do this. And that's not realistic for the majority of us. We need paychecks. A lot of us need benefits and everything like that. If you're in a situation that's not really supportive, it's not the situation you want to be in, do try to prioritize your well-being. Use some of those positive mindset reframing techniques of, hey, I don't have to work here forever, or by working here, it provides the paycheck so I can pay my bills, and still live life. Figure out how can you find that balance of here's where I need to be for 8+ hours a day. I need to get my job done to survive, but I'm going to prioritize my well-being by implementing these boundaries, by doing these practices, by not eating lunch at your desk, by taking a walking break, finding that person at work that can be your friend at work. And maybe you're just work friends. Maybe you never talk outside of the workplace. Research shows we need friends at work. And I always say, your work friend, it doesn't mean you're friends outside of the four walls, but you're friends while you're there at work. That's your safe place. So hopefully you can find something like that. Advocate for yourself and your well-being. Like, you're never going to regret prioritizing yourself, but you will regret making personal sacrifices for your workplace.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautifully said. I appreciate you because you bring a lot of insight on not only like in our daily work, but also personally, right? Like even the sense of belonging. I just had to say it because I was listening to a podcast earlier today and, creating the sense of belonging in your own house. Sometimes family members don't feel the sense of belonging in their own family. And I just thought about this, and I know we're wrapping it up, but you said very beautiful things that is not only applicable in our work environment, but also in our personal life. Remember that creating that sense of belonging and safety that Chase is saying, it starts with us and setting boundaries. And sometimes people feel more safe at work than at their house. Mm-hmm. It's actually a thing. Sometimes they feel better outside of their homes. And I appreciate those thoughts because belonging is more complex than what meets the eye. But I appreciate your time and I am very grateful for you to share the knowledge and everything that you have provided to me and my audience. And so with that said, guys, this is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Chase is a beautiful human being. Check her out. Her LinkedIn, I'll link it down below. And yeah, guys, bye.